talk about the importance of grain in your footage. This is something that I really wish I had known starting out in visual effects back in college and learning everything about visual effects on YouTube. I wish that there was more of an importance of grain settings. So we're gonna actually go through that today and see why it's incredibly important. So right here, I just have a little clip from my senior film, and what I'm going to do is take the little driver's license right here, and we're going to paint that out. We're going to remove it. I figured that would be a pretty simple thing to do. So we're going to use Mocha because this is a planar surface, and that's the easiest thing, the easiest way to get this thing stuck is going into Mocha. I'm going to go fairly quickly through this because this isn't a video on planar tracking. If you would like a video on planar tracking, let me know, and I can probably get something like that in the works. Okay, so we have our license plate tracked. Let me go ahead and close out of Mocha. What I'm going to do is actually take a solid. I'm going to go ahead, grab kind of the general color of the solid. Probably that. That works. And then I'm going to apply the tracking data. Corner pin and motion blur, and boom. Now if we turn that on, it's right where we want it. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go ahead and pre-comp this. We'll call it patch. And then we're going to get started. So I can hide that, that's our Mocha track, and here's our base footage. So if we look at this image, we can very plainly see that there is something covering this area, right? There's a couple things we need to do. If your project is in 16-bit, there's a really helpful tool. I'm actually gonna copy this, bring it in here, set it as guide layer. There's a really helpful tool called the 4-color gradient, and we're gonna use that. So 4-color gradient, I'm gonna take this, I'll put it right there, and that sets that color. What it does is it maps 4 different corners to colors, and you can specify exactly where in space these colors are, and it helps get a more solid looking gradient. So that looks pretty good. Let's go in here. Now it's time to do the all important step, which is adding grain, right? Every camera, no matter what camera it is, whether it's digital, whether it's analog, every single camera has noise. It has grain. And if you do a patch where you, in this instance, take a solid, you track it to an area, and you just do that, there is no grain, there's no noise, there's nothing on top of that patch to make it look like it's actually in the scene. And our goals as VFX artists is to make sure everything looks like it was shot on that day. Make sure everything looks right. It looks like it was done in camera. So what we need to do is go in here and add grain on top of this. And if you look right here, you see that there's none. Now what I can do actually is I can add an adjustment layer. Let me add some levels because this was shot in log. I'm gonna crush the image pretty much. Clamp the image. And then I might even add, let's see, unsharp mask help. Yeah, so you can see all the noise that's right here. These are just image color manipulations, but you can see that there's a huge difference between the noise that's right here and the solid that we added in the scene. So what we need to do is add noise back on top. We need to add noise back on top in order to make it match. Now, we already have the scene tracked, and I pre-composed it so that we just have our composition set. There's no transformation happening throughout the shot in terms of this pre-comp right here, this layer. So that's perfect. We wouldn't want to do it in here because this moves around and that would mess up with the noise profile. So let's go in here. After Effects actually has an incredible grain effect, add grain. It's really powerful, really good. The only thing that holds it back is that it's not 32-bit. And when you work in ACES or you work in really high quality footage, or if you work in EXR files from a 3D program, you need to work in 32-bit. So there are plugins that you can get for After Effects that will allow it. It's just really annoying to have to deal with. Plus those plugins are expensive. So After Effects is really slow to actually get this effect into the 32-bit space. I really hope that they do soon because it would be really good. This is actually one of my favorite grain effects. And they just really need to make it a thing. So let's go through this thing. I'm gonna show you exactly what things you may need to know when matching grain. We have the tweaking area and we have the application. Those are the only things that we're going to need to change to get this thing to match well. Actually, what we might do, since the edge right here is really harsh, let's go ahead and add a blur. Let's add a little fast blur right at the beginning. And we can do, I don't know, 3 just to blur the edges here so it doesn't look too harsh. All right, that's good. So in the add grain, it looks like it's just a bit too intense. So let's go ahead and dial that down to maybe 0.3. Is looking much better, much less intense. I think we should reduce our size a little bit, which reducing the size basically sharpens the noise. Yeah, it basically sharpens the noise a good amount. And then if you look in here, it's all pretty soft. So we can add a little bit to our softness just to make it match. We're just looking at the size, the intensity, and the softness for now. This is not an anamorphic lens that I shot on, so we don't have to worry about the aspect ratio. So that's looking pretty good. However, we need to adjust each channel. So not only do you need to adjust the look of it overall, you need to go into the individual channels and make sure those match the surrounding areas. So right here, this little 3-color doodad, we can go to red, and this will show us everything in the red channel. Now it looks like the red channel is a little intense, so we can go into the red channel intensity and just dial that down a little bit. 0.9, maybe 0.8. It's looking better. Let's go into the green channel. The green channel, we need to really dial down the intensity. So let's do like 0.3. See, that's too much. 0.5. It's all about tweaking, and it also looks like it's too big, so we can reduce the size of the green in order to further match the channel. That's a bit too much. So it's a lot of tweaking going back and forth in each individual channel just to make sure that it looks right. That still looks a bit too intense. Okay, so now let's go into the blue channel. The blue channel is super low. Let's bring down that intensity. Okay. Actually looking pretty good. So now that that is set, we can go ahead and go back here. Let's go ahead. We can actually turn this into a guide layer and turn it off. And now if we look, I'm not sure how YouTube compression is going to make this look, but if we hit play, this area pretty much disappears. And it's all due to having the little grain effects. So it's really important to make sure that when you're doing patches, you're doing removal work, you need to dial in your grain settings on the areas that you fix. You need to make sure that they are set. That is something I really wish I had known, because I've worked on some Netflix projects, worked on some Hallmark movies. They're incredibly, incredibly adamant on making sure grain matches, especially Netflix. So I highly recommend, as best as your ability, match the grain. So we've done that in After Effects. Let's try it in Fusion. So here I have Fusion set, and this is pretty much the exact same setup that I had with After Effects. I have the shot right here. I planar tracked it, and then down here is my solid. It's just a background, and it has a 4-corner gradient, just like the one in After Effects. I have our corner pin. I blurred the edges. I applied the transformation, and now we need to merge. So this Fusion has 2 different grain effects. They have grain, and then they have film grain. Both of them have their advantages, disadvantages. You probably ought to try them yourself and see which one works for which project. But I already went in here and matched the grain, and that looks really good. And I did it for both. And I think I like the effect of the film grain more. So let's go ahead and show you how I did it. So in this first one, I have the merge, and if you can see, it is very noisy. Let's see, can I just crush it? No, that doesn't work. Okay. As you can see, it is noisy except for the area that we need to have fixed. So I have this grain node, I'm gonna bring that in, and now we just need to dial everything in. So it looks like the intensity, actually I can copy over these effects so we can, view our crunched scene. I can go in here and adjust our settings. Our power, we can bring that down way much. Really want to bring it down just a little bit more. Okay. Now we go into the individual channels. So here's our red channel. I'm actually going to just do this one. Here's our red channel. We're probably going to want to increase it a little bit more. You do that with the red difference slider. You can go into the green channel if you hit G. That's just a bit too much. Looks good. And B. So blue channel. Blue's okay. Actually, no, we need to increase blue. Good amount. Way too much. Yep, that's looking good. And then we can even go in, if you hit B again, it'll go to RGB. Increase the grain size, even add a little bit of spacing in there. So there's some cool changes in here that's really nice to have. And then the softness, we can turn it down to 0, or we can actually add a little bit of softness to it. And that's looking pretty good. That's looking really good. And then we can do the same thing with the film grain. Now the film grain effect doesn't have a softness setting already inside it. It has this roughness one, but it doesn't really soften the grain all that much. So I added a small little blur node in there just to soften it a little bit, and it worked out really well. So let's go in here and adjust everything. Complexity, you don't need. Log processing, you don't really need to turn that off. Monochrome, you want color grain, because every camera has color grain. It's not just black and white grain. Now let's go ahead. I can even input a random seed, and that's really nice, and you can just hit that to reseed it, which is cool. Let's go ahead and turn down that color. Actually, we don't turn down the color strength. We need to turn down the size because it's just a bit too big. You can even turn down the strength, the intensity. And now we go into the individual channels. It might be incredibly difficult to see just because of YouTube compression. And I'm sorry for that. I wish it wasn't like that, but that's just kind of how they do it. That's how YouTube is. So basically, you go in, do all the color adjustments to make it match, and it works. I wanted to make sure that I made a video like this because for me, I never knew how important it was to match grain when I started out in visual effects. When I was on YouTube, 3 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours a day trying to figure out how to do simple VFX shots, no one ever said how important it was to match grain of your shots to the footage in the film. So I hope that this helps. I really do. It's incredibly important whenever you start working in studios and do big budget stuff and start working with companies that take their visual effects extremely seriously. And I hope that this really helps you later. So if you like this video, please consider subscribing. We have a small channel, almost at 3,000 subscribers, which is really cool. Want to keep things growing, want to keep interest in visual effects alive because it's my favorite part of filmmaking, and I hope it's yours, or I hope you take these videos and learn more from them if you're not in visual effects. You see how important it is to consider visual effects side when making films. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Let's keep creating.